It is so wonderful to see everybody, and welcome to the Africana Studies and Research Center. I am Associate Professor Rashay Richardson, and I am beyond excited that all of us are here and for just such an important reason today. So, well, I know that a lot of you have come from great distances, and so it's a blessing that you have arrived. My prayers are for everyone who's headed here, and that we're already having a wonderful time, my goodness, and I don't even know how much I can contain, so I'm just excited. But I want to just mention our event and the purpose. So the title of the program, as many of you know, is Making History, reflecting on the legacy of James Turner and Black student activism, 1969 to 2019. Surprise, Professor Turner. So at this point, I will turn the floor over to our interim director, Olufemi Taiwo, to say a few remarks, and then we'll follow our program as printed.
Thank you very much, I appreciate it. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
And welcome to the Africana Center. I'm glad that I just have to welcome you. I don't have to say anything. But it is really my honor and privilege to be occupying this chair at this moment, to be able to welcome all of you. I put it that way because, you know, life has a way of giving its own script to us. And when I assumed the interim position, I did not see this coming. So when I say it is an honor, that's exactly what I mean, because it's a pure happenstance that I happen to be acting chair when this great event is taking place. I want to thank my colleagues who put together this incredible program. I want to thank all of you for saying yes to us. I always like to point out to people, may you never hold a party that people don't come to. So the fact that you have come is a tribute to us. And although this is going to continue for the next 2 days, I would like to start this by thanking Professor Turner for leading a life that made it compelling for us to host this. He could have made other choices. Some would have been much easier than the ones he made. But thank goodness for the choices that he made. We are all here today. Not just in terms of this impressive physical structures, but more importantly, for the legacy that we are celebrating. And for that, I want to thank you. And I would also like to extend my thanks on this call to his family. Because all too often, we talk as if we do these things by ourselves. And the ones who end up paying the real price are the ones who have to hang out with us on a daily basis. They are the ones who feel the absences. They are the ones who know when we are not where we should be, especially when it comes to milestones in their lives. So I hope we never forget to always, as we say in my original language, when you see the plant on the surface of the water doing a good dance, the drummers are always beneath the surface. Our families are quite often, those are the drummers beneath the surface, when we do good to the outside world. Thank you all very much for that. So for the rest, you are in very good hands. That's because they are not mine. And I wish you all successful deliberations, and I hope that we all have fun. Thank you very much.
I've been on the faculty in Africana for over 10 years now, which is amazing. I spent the first 10 years of my academic career in the University of California system. And in any good year in my department, I might expect to see one speaker centrally germane to my field. And so when I arrived in Africana, it was just extraordinary, overwhelming in some ways even, to experience the programming in this department. I mean, it was really over the top in so many ways that were quite impressive to me as a scholar of African American literature. And what I found to be particularly ironic in some ways was that in this interdisciplinary department, I actually had more encounters, like visceral encounters, with some of the major practitioners in my field than I'd ever had in the traditional discipline of English. And so my first semester here, I was on sabbatical leave, and even so, I literally could not wait for the sun to come up every morning so that I could get to Africana because of all of the exciting things that were going on in our programming. And every day literally seemed to feel like Christmas in some ways. It was a dance almost that I didn't want to end because there were just so many phenomenal things going on. Within the first month, Angela Davis was here as our scholar in residence. There was a wonderful symposium on hip hop, then the soul scene and the arts. There was a symposium on James Baldwin, all of these wonderful events. And so I've consistently seen extraordinary programming happen. But I couldn't be more excited that we've come to a point where we're planning, literally, we've been planning this symposium for months now. And so I just want to take a moment to just welcome you on behalf of our programming committee in Africana that I've been able to serve as chair of for the past few months. And they are to be applauded for this incredible event. Willard Strait, the Willard Strait occupation is a pivotal moment in Cornell's history. And so unanimously, we felt that it would be most interesting and relevant and useful for our purposes to draw on Professor Turner's remarkable legacy as a lens for thinking about and through the 50th anniversary of the Willard Strait occupation. And so that's one reason that we're here. There's so many events going on, so later this afternoon, Erica Cree is going to overview the various events that are going on and give you a heads up so that even in the coming week, you know, if you have time on your schedule and inclination, you can attend the just incredible schedule of events that's going to be unfolding even beyond this weekend. So we're happy and proud to help kick off this extraordinary commemoration on Cornell's campus. I'll begin just by introducing the members of our programming committee. So they also include my colleague, Dr. Ndri Asiye Lumumba, Dr. Siba Rabaki. Okay, so he's not here yet. And Dr. Gerard Achin. Could we have Cornell's Africana faculty stand up? Anyone on the faculty? As well as including our faculty emeritus. Members of the Africana graduate field, would you please stand? Africana alumni, Africana graduates would we're going to have time and more space for introductions and to, do roll call. But for starters, it's just so wonderful to see everyone. Welcome, welcome. And so the first order of business is to have our first panel, which focuses on experiences in working with Professor James Turner. So at this point, could we have our panelists come to the front, please?
Okay, good afternoon. Hi, everybody. Hi. This is an amazing day, and I'll tell you 3 amazing things that happened to me already for the day. And this is like the third. This morning, very early, one of my 9 sisters from undergrad called me and said, "You know, we've been a Delta for 50 years. Wow. So if there are Deltas in the house, woo. Okay, so that happened this morning. And I was telling in the exam we just did, which is the following thing, that it made me feel 2 things. On one hand, kind of old, like, wow, I've really been around quite a while. And secondly, it made me feel happy to get to this point in my life that I can say that I've been a Delta for 50 years. Not been anywhere for 50 years. So the second thing was, we had an amazing defense of the first PhD in Africana Studies, and I was the chair, and I'm so happy that this young lady came through in a brilliant way. Young Haitian American student, and she did a PhD on dissertation on Haitian American women writers in the era of anti-immigrant America. So you know what she's talking about. So it's well in the tradition of Africana studies. And then thirdly, being here, it's an honor to be with my dear colleague, Dr. Turner. And although I've been in Africana for 11 years, Richie and I came around the same time, I knew Dr. Turner before that. And actually, this is one of the reasons I came back upstate. I was recruited to Florida International to build their Africana Studies program, which I did. and used a lot of the modeling from Africana here to begin that program, because this was the model that really had the biggest impact in the field. So I did that, and I was happy to be living in Miami, Florida, where I could swim in the night and the pool and all that. and then I got an invitation through actually my colleague Ann Adams. She was like, we need somebody like you to come back up here and really do what I used to do in Africana. And it's a blessing to be able to do that. Actually, I came back, and Dr. Turner can testify. I called him before I came, and I said, there's an interest in this, what do you think? And actually, he told me honestly that we're going through some struggles. He did tell me that. But I came back precisely because I felt that I knew Africana long enough and well enough. And how did I know Africana? I used to be a prof at Binghamton University, SUNY, and this was the place we would come all the time to listen to the greats, to hear Baldwin, to see Murray Evans, I mean, everything you could think about. Anybody you could think about was here. And Binghamton never had the kind of resources or money, so this was the place we would bring our students here. And also did with Dr. Harris, when he was developing an amazing Ford Foundation graduate program on Black intellectual history. He came to us and spoke to our Binghamton faculty about building a consortium. And we did that for a number of years and had grad students in common. And actually that syllabus was the one I used when we were creating the masters at Cardiff International University. So coming back, I was pleased to come back for all those reasons. Plus I knew upstate New York then, having worked at Binghamton for those years. And therefore it was a pleasure. But beyond that, I would call Dr. Turner whenever we had, I was kind of a prophet in my youth who was quite activist. So we would often have issues, diversity struggles and so on. And I would often call Dr. Turner for advice and tell him what was going on. And he, as you know, very quiet, calmly, you know, articulated advice about what some of the possibilities were or could be and what some of our rights were and those kinds of things. So he was always the kind of person I felt I could consult with on all kinds of issues. And then working here for the last 10 years, it's such a joy seeing Dr. Turner every time I see him. So somebody mentioned in the program about being cool. Yes, we love that about you, Dr. Turner. And I've been in faculty meetings where somebody was berating him, and I said to the person, you have no idea who you're talking to in terms of what you do. And he didn't say a word. He just listened to that person be an idiot. So, yeah, I'm quoting him. I already wrote it. So Dr. Turner is that epitome of cool, and that kind of black man that we admire and respect and love and cherish, and I'm so happy to be in your presence. Plus he was down the hall from me, so I could always, as we all did, stop in and say hi and talk to him and just be in his presence. Just by way of talking a little bit about some of the things, this just came out. It's actually not on Amazon yet, but it will be. A reproduction of The Groundings with My Brothers. I was fortunate to be asked to write an introduction to it. This is the only authorized copy right now because according to Pat Rodney and family, many of the other copies were circulating without the family getting any recognition. But I say this because Walter Rodney, who, those of you who know anything about Africana studies writ large, Black history, Caribbean history, African history, would know the significance of Walter Rodney. But he was one of the faculty members here. And it's not just Walter Rodney, but many other intellectuals, as my colleague Richard Richardson just said, came through Africana and were here and were on the faculty, whether it's Michelle Wallace, so many other names, I won't go into them. But Rodney said something interesting about Black studies, and I'll just quote from my piece. The entry of Africana studies, this is from the intro, my own intro. The entry of Africana studies at the institutional level was meant to address the issue of representation at the level of thinking, and to at least provide a basis for challenging the overwhelming Eurocentralization of knowledge and the parallel creation of informed students, faculty, and administrators, and community. Rodney also had an advanced position here And besides his Dar es Salaam appointment, he had institutional connections in places like Cornell University's Africana Studies and Research Center. And I want to say a few other things, but I want to quote for you what Walter Rodney says about Black Studies, because it's so relevant now, because as much as we have a beautiful building and a PhD program, the energy and the joy of what Africana was that you all understand is not here. And I'm being frankly honest, and I'm written about this, I'm documented. So whatever I say, you can check it out. But this is what Walter Rodney says. Black people are here in these institutions as part of the development of Black struggle, but only as a concession designed to incorporate us within their structure. He's saying that besides the institution and all of that, he's also thinking about the books, the references, the theoretical assumptions, and the entire ideological underpinnings of what we have to learn in every single discipline. I continue then that in many ways Black studies, Africana studies, is caught in a paradox, either being located in separate enclaves which eventually can be incorporated or eliminated, or remain at the mercy of an institutional structure which has not really changed. But in my view, there's another opinion, one provided by radical intellectuals such as Edward Said, and that is to provide a counter-discourse in times when institutions want to create a normalization of oppression. So this to me is the role of the scholar activist. This is the role of Africana studies. This is the model that was created by Africana studies at Cornell, a counter-discourse to institutionalized structures which want to colonize, maintain a colonization of knowledge. We continue to decolonize knowledge. And against all adversities, where we get invited to go into other departments, I have been, but my field is Africana studies. I was trained at Howard University's African Studies program, and my PhD is from the University of Ibadan in Nigeria in African literature. So my formation is in African literature, and although I have a joint appointment in the English department, this is my base, and we stay and struggle to make Africana what it should be. And we invite your support as we move forward to just challenge all of the various ways, internally and externally, that some of the ways in which the full realization of what Africana studies should be is being hampered, is being limited. So I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
Hola. I was raised as a spoiled only child, and the only two brothers I've had in my life have been Ron Walters and James Turner. And I was trying to think how we first met. So I started looking for some objective validation of that. And I was looking through, there's a book out which I recommend that you read. It's called The Challenge of Blackness, and it's the history of the Institute of the Black World, the first independent black think tank in this country. James came to our first Black Studies Directors Conference when we were trying to deal with the whole question of Black Studies in this country. He also helped us raise money after the COINTELPRO us. And what we had to do was develop a period of a small organization. So those of us who could, we left Atlanta. Bobby Hill went to Dartmouth. Benson went to Mennonite. He went to Philadelphia. I went to UMass. And we were able to keep IBW alive. James, as I said, came to our first Black Studies Directors Conference. He also helped us raise money after they COINTELPRO'd us and tried to kill our funding. So James is a brother in more than one way. I was trying to think when we first met. It's been more than 50 years. It's been more than 50. It's been more than 50 years. So I think we need to ask, where do we go from here? America is going to hell. And those of us who have been on the underside of America are totally like James Baldwin and Malcolm X, we are America's only real critics. And we need to explain to this country how is it possible that black people and brown people and progressive whites can save America. It's questionable. But we need a counter discourse. We need to expose the fallacy of what passes for intellectual disciplines. And it started with Black studies, but now we need something bigger, grander, more majestic, and more threatening. Ciao. Wow.
Well, I am something of an outlier on this panel, on this very distinguished panel, because I was not fortunate enough to work directly with Dr. Turner, of course, as a colleague, but I do consider myself, on my better days, an heir of Dr. Turner's legacy of scholarship and activism. So I'm quite humbled to bring just a few words of contribution to this celebration of not just a tremendous scholar activist, but in fact a celebration of a movement for not just scholarly excellence, but social change. So I want to say just a few words about how I came to learn about Dr. Turner as an undergrad and in my first few years out of college. I was working on a biography of Dr. Betty Shabazz, Malcolm X's widow. And I was told that one of the people that I needed to talk to understand the tradition of keeping alive the legacy of Brother Malcolm was Dr. Turner. So I called up Dr. Turner, didn't have no degree, didn't have a PhD, didn't have a master's, but I called up Dr. Turner here at Cornell. He said, well, come on, brother, come and talk to me. He said, but just send me an email. This was early in the email days. You just send me an email first and let me know exactly what you want to talk about. So I sent him an email and I waited a few days and I called him up and said, Dr. Turner, you never wrote back. And he said, I never got the email. And I said, well, wait, how do you spell Cornell again? Turned out I had spelled Cornell wrong, so he never got the email. Nevertheless, he still, even then, he still agreed to do the interview with me to show you just how forgiving the brother actually is. When Dr. Turner helped to launch Africana, he was deeply committed to going far beyond what he thought of as a narrow race relations project. This was not about creating a mechanism that would serve as a kind of ambassadorial, diplomatic go-between between a Negro world and a white world. He had something much more trenchant and something much more insurgent in mind, and in many respects, Africana was a manifestation of the Black consciousness movement. What Dr. Turner called the desire of Afro-Americans to decide their own destiny through the control of their own political organizations and the formation and preservation of their cultural, economic, and social institutions. And Dr. Turner, even then, in 1969, was committed to developing new epistemologies based on the principles of self-definition and self-determination for people of African descent, that he was committed to prying loose from Black minds the grip of white hands, that he was committed to occasioning a revolution in what Lerone Bennett called the winding corridors of the mind, that he was rejecting the assimilationist and accommodationist traditions in Black life. A contemporary historian of the time, a liberal, Kenneth Stamp, had said, after all, that Negroes are only white men with black skins. nothing more and nothing less. And Dr. Turner and Africana utterly rejected that notion, committed to a rigorous engagement with the Afro-American culture, and in fact the Africana culture globally, and its world of rituals and symbols and motifs. And he further rejected utterly the deficit model of studying black people, the notion that somehow that there was something wrong with us that was based on pathology, right? On Monday, a young brother that I think follows in the tradition of Dr. Turner, Ibram Kendi, will be here. And one of the things Ibram always said to me, I thought it was so profound, there's nothing wrong with black folks. Black people need to understand that. I think that Dr. Turner and Africana always exemplified that. So whether hanging out in Louis Michel's old bookstore on 125th and Avenue Clayton Powell in Harlem, or being mentored by John Henry Clark, whether participating in the Tour de Black University conference at Howard University in '68, helping to found AHSA, whether providing leadership to the North American delegation of the 6th Pan-African Congress in 1974, while helping to build the National Council of Black Studies, working in the anti-apartheid movement in the 80s, the reparations movement, the Malcolm X Commemoration Commission, the editorial board, Journal of African American History, hosting State of the Black Race forums, interpreting David Walker's appeal, that Dr. Turner was committed to returning his people, rather, to the stage of history, returning his people to the stage of history, of enabling black people, helping enable black people to achieve what he called a true and unadulterated experience of their humanity through the twin enterprises of education and struggle. That Turner's praxis was committed to helping black people seize what Stokely Carmichael and Kwame Ture called the dictatorship of definition, the power to exert significant control over the meaning of their experience, the definition of their past, and the paths of their future. So in closing, I wanted to say that this is not at all, we've come together to celebrate Dr. Turner, to celebrate Africana, but obviously that this is not simply about hagiography, that we're not simply celebrating an individual, that in fact we're here to lift up a tradition. We're here to lift up a black intellectual tradition. We're here to lift up black radical traditions. And here I'll quote, if you just allow me a few more seconds, I'll quote Dr. Turner himself. He said, David Walker, Sojourner Truth, Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, Martin Delany, Henry Highland Garnett, Annie Helen Burroughs, Mary Stewart, Ida B. Wells. We invoke these ancestors not to mystify, but to emphasize tradition, a magnificent tradition of critical thought created by Africans in America. So as we contemplate the future of Africana, I think we have to think about that tradition as a living tradition. You know, the best traditions are not frozen or inert. Tradition should never be a lifeless artifact. It should be a conversation with the next generation. Dr. Turner himself has always urged what he called a continuous re-evaluation of self. So the question is, how do we remain relevant? Are we relevant enough today? How is Africana and Black Studies more generally relevant to the current crises of racial capitalism throughout the world? How is Africana and Black Studies relevant to responses, for example, to climate change, which of course threatens the entire species, but which poses an especially profound threat to poor people and to historically colonized people, including millions of Africana people? How do we become truly global? How do our aspirations continue to honor the expansive vision that initiated this great project of Africana Studies? We need to address more urgently the question that Dr. Scott Brown raises in Discourse on Africana Studies, James Turner, in the Paradigms of Knowledge. He said, well, what does autonomy mean within the parameters of academic institutions formed and sustained by concentrations of private wealth and state bureaucratic power? How do we remain relevant? So I look forward to engaging with these questions with you over the course of the weekend and continuing to talk about what Dr. Carol Boyce Davies and others have called the decolonization of the Academy. And I like to think of decolonization as an ongoing project. There's never a post-colonial utopia. You're always struggling. You're always struggling. I'll just end with the words of Margaret Walker from 1937. Let a new earth rise. Let another world be born. Let a bloody peace be written in the sky. Let a second generation full of courage issue forth. Let a people loving freedom come to growth. Let a beauty full of healing and a strength of final clenching be the pulsing in our spirits and our blood. Let the martial songs be written. Let the dirges disappear. Let a people now rise and take control.
My name is Ron Robinson. I'm a graduate in the class of 1978. And there's some words that I just heard that are great concepts of reevaluation of self and the decolonization of the mind. And they're personally relevant to me because I transferred to Cornell in 1975 as a sophomore. And I grew up in Jersey City, and I'm biracial. My mother's from Germany, my father's a black man from the segregated South. And my experience growing up, our family didn't make people like us back in those days in terms of biracial people. There's only a few. And our family integrated the Catholic parish in Jersey City. My brother and myself integrated the Catholic school. So our experience was growing up as colored kids and Negroes who were automatically deemed inferior by the whites, who are supposedly our peers. And so the colonization of my mind began early, and it persisted. I had no sense of myself outside of the context of rebelling against the labels that were being put on me by my classmates. I didn't want to be a Negro, because Negro, just because you capitalized the word with an N, didn't mean that you were considered to be a capitalized person. You were always a subject. And Negro meant, in their world, automatically inferior. So fighting against this kind of labeling and this interiorization of Negro as inferior, but not really understanding the legacy and the context of how this all came to be, you're left sort of flailing. You're trying to make sense out of something that doesn't make any sense. And it didn't make any sense to me until I took the sociology of the black experience taught by Professor Turner. I came into that class, a kid who was, relatively smart and intelligent, but I'd already been brainwashed. And I remember sitting at the conference table, and we were talking about enslavement and the experience of slavery. And I remember saying something to the effect that the slave masters really didn't treat their slaves too badly. Now, you can imagine hearing somebody say that, and you're in a class full of black students, right? And what I remember, James was just cool. He didn't look at me like, what, are you drunk, crazy, or any of that. But just through Socratic method questioning and the exposure to the literature that we were reading and of the great works, and really a sense of just the camaraderie that was developed and respect of guiding someone to an understanding of the self and the reevaluating of themselves. And it's something that was so profoundly empowering on a personal level. What does that really mean to become a self and integrate itself? personhood, and to share that experience with others around a conference table, day in and day out as we would explore these subjects. And within, relatively, I would say within a month, Dr. Turner cracked my consciousness open. And the decolonization process was in full gear. And without going into a long story about what happened after that, I just really wanted to share with you, Dr. Turner, personally, what you've meant in my life, my own journey, my own self-discovery, and things that I've done because I passed those on to my students. And there are a lot of people who benefited just from the conveyance of you through me, that you'll never meet or never know, but they're out there. And I'm still learning and I'm still growing, because this is not an easy world to navigate. You know, there's the constant assaults on our sense of self, and we have to figure those out because they come from people that look like us and people who don't look like us, and they come from our own shadow sides. But here today, as we honor Dr. Turner and we look at the legacy that Dr. Turner has left, it's a legacy that's left in our souls, in my soul, in my life. And I just want to say, God bless you, brother. I love you dearly. And thank you for all that you've given me and so many others.
Hello again. The title of my brief paper in honor of Professor Turner is entitled The Turner Effect. I first met Professor James Turner on my campus visit to interview for my job when I was taken to his office to meet him in February of 2008. That day, he kindly welcomed me and told me that he valued my work in Southern Studies focused on the U.S. South and that such insights are needed and important to represent. At one point, he also raised a question about a point in my book and indicated that he didn't agree with me. I loved it when he told me that, which showed that he had taken time to read my work and that he truly heard me. I've been excited to have an essay come out in the issue of Black Renaissance Noir, but when I shared copies with several of my colleagues on my job back then, they really hadn't noticed or seemed to care. That experience had honestly given me the feeling that I could literally write for 20 years, and as long as I published and did what I was supposed to do, could advance up the ranks perfectly well while still lacking the kind of dynamic intellectual engagement and conversation that I craved, that it made me want to become a professor in the first place. That was not why I had signed on to be an academic when I was 21. Outside of my review processes and on regular, ordinary days in everyday life, I wanted to feel that my writing was truly heard. So even though I had lots of support, had been tenured and promoted unanimously, was promoted in my department where I was the only Black scholar and was doing very well in my career, the sense of invisibility I felt increasingly within such dynamics troubled me. My encounter with Professor Turner, even in a context like my Cornell job interview, was deeply inspiring. It gave me that feeling of being 19 again, as the young woman who had passionately debated ideas when I was a student at Spelman in the Atlanta University Center in the rich cultural community of the early 1990s. I had been taught world civilization from the revolutionary perspective of Russell and Dalcio, My earliest friendships at Spelman had literally revolved around conversations about Mr. Indalcio with my roommate from South Africa and another young woman in our dorm, Packard Hall, who were also taking courses with Mr. Indalcio. He had challenged notions that blacks in Africa had not been civilized by raising questions about the prioritization of criteria such as a written language, discussed the problem of colorism, had a deep passion for teaching, and was a committed mentor who cared deeply about and connected with his students, and had class lectures that drew visitors alongside his students during every session. By the time that the early 1990s came around, the moment seemed to be a 1960s revival in black communities. Buying from black bookstores and vendors were cultural commitments and practices that I savored, along with attending lectures by the chorus of scholars in black studies and black leaders who came through Spelman and Morehouse to deliver talks on those campuses and to local bookstores, including the Shrine of the Black Madonna. Studying, reading, talking, and thinking about black culture was a passion for me. Meeting Professor Turner when I visited him at Cornell took me back to the time when Akinyele Imoja had become a role model for some young black men at Morehouse, and I had also first met him at the Atlanta community as a student leader and activist at Spelman, and started the organization Sisters in Solidarity to Eradicate Sexism that circulated leaflets against Freaknik at Morehouse. I ultimately connected with Students for African American Empowerment, the main articulation of the black student movement in the Atlanta University Center. On the faculty at UC Davis, I had consistently maintained connections with and supported Black Students United and BGPSA, and reflected on Black student movement, in part because I identified with Black student movement and felt a profound indebtedness to it for helping to create the space for scholars in my field on campus. But my encounter with Professor Turner reminded me how much I was also still that person, that young woman in the AUC. The young woman who, when I wasn't away at school debating various issues in my social circles, debated them at home in Montgomery during a time when my main social circle included my trio of male friends from school, whom I referred to in shorthand as my brotherhood among my friends, and was mainly known as a poet who dreamed of meeting my own Malcolm X, a man for all seasons, and on occasion even dialogued with some of the members of the Nation of Islam because their headquarters was a boarding house diagonally across from my home. Those were days during which they would not have outmatched me in breaking things down to assimilationist Negroes. There were days when I called into talk radio shows to debate different ideas and wrote news reporters about stories that I found to be problematic at home, and savored work as a campus reporter when I was at school at Spelman. To be sure, his impact on me from my initial encounter with him helps me to understand why Professor Turner is so admired and treasured among his students. One provisional way to think about what this means is to describe it as the Turner effect, which I know is real and lasting because I experienced it myself. Professor Turner is part of why I wanted to come to Cornell and help to bring me here. In my early years, he dropped by my office on occasion and we talked about various topics and issues. However, he never mentioned Africana or any colleagues or institutional politics at all, not ever. He was only curious about and interested in hearing my opinions and perspectives and would share his ideas. My relationship with him was, as a colleague was what I dreamed it would be, all about sharing and exchanging ideas. He has always been kind, considerate, and collegial toward me, supportive of me, and just gave me the space to be myself. Much like that first day visiting his office, his respect for me over the years and investment in me has never had anything to do with whether he agreed with me or not on an issue. In some cases, he hasn't. But regardless, he has been a colleague for all seasons, whom I know is genuinely invested in my well-being. In spite of my background and training in Black Studies, I wasn't familiar with the Willard Strait occupation, and so studied it in the months before moving here. In this process, I was troubled by the reactionary narrative of it that even framed it as a catalyst for the nation's culture wars that fully erupted in the 1990s, and for limiting and compromising values such as academic freedom. My PhD program at Duke while it had become one of the top programs in the nation, was controversial for some for having hired scholars whom some pundits derisively described as tenured radicals. It had been similarly and famously linked to the phenomenon of the culture wars in this nation, which was provocative and made me all the more curious to understand how and why that narrative had been associated with the Willard Strait occupation at Cornell. How the media characterized some of the faculty at my graduate institution, including some scholars whom I knew or who had taught me, made me suspicious that such characterizations of the student movement at Cornell had also been grossly exaggerated and were unfair. One of my goals has long been to think about this history in a more balanced and less sensationalized way. Like many students, I was curious about the Willard Strait occupation when I came here, and over the years have built my knowledge of this history and learned alongside them as I have taught this topic. The panel on which Professor Turner appeared alongside Gloria Joseph at this department's 40th anniversary celebration is part of what helped me to realize that there needed to be a course on the occupation. In the weeks that followed, I began to work with Professor Turner, Professor Robert L. Harris, and Eric Acree on what turned out to be a multi-year journey to bring it to fruition so that it is now part of this department's curriculum. I had originally proposed it as a non-credit house course for auditing that would be taught at Ujima for a few weeks every spring leading up to the anniversary, but Professor Turner insisted that it have a minimum of 2 credits. The original proposal was supported and got valuable feedback from a range of people, including student leaders in Black Students United and several Africana graduate students. The pilot version of the course was offered in the spring of 2017. In it, we take the long view of Cornell's history, examine slavery in the making of higher education, have a unit on Black student movement, and also include a unit on Professor Turner by drawing on Discourse on Africana Studies, the project that outlines his theorization of Africana Studies, edited by Scott Brown. Students have thrived and been truly innovative within its workshop format and have produced some outstanding projects, including 2 short films on Warri House, a project on food insecurity in Ithaca, an examination of Black experiences and residences at Cornell, an archive of the Trillium Takeover, a booklet on what it means to be an ally, a curriculum for teaching the Willard Strait occupation at the high school level, a project on Black athletes and activism at Cornell, a project on how to better engage Black alumni. Actually, 2 of the students, would you all stand up right quick? These are students from among other outstanding work. Students in the first year proposed the community syllabus established on Facebook because it was important to them to share insights from our studies with a broader public. And one of the goals is to also set up a website. They brainstormed ideas and guidelines for hosting a major national undergraduate conference at Cornell focused on the topic of Black student movement and viewed it as a logical extension of the revitalized Black student movement at the national level, in part because Cornell students have been thought leaders in this area over time. Teaching the Willard Strait course is a pleasure and an honor. It has been one of my best and favorite courses at Cornell. Without a doubt, Professor Turner has been a colleague that it could not have ever happened without, the wind beneath his wings, and thought it was valuable, though he urged me to proceed with caution. I am deeply thankful for his support, encouragement, generosity, and intellectual passion and kind spirit. God bless you, Professor Turner, and thank you.